Good morning, everybody. Good morning. I'd like to welcome the guests that we have with us today, Elena. And online, we have Delna Tumbata joining us this morning. And then our speaker, Michael Kennedy, who will be introduced in a little bit. We will start off with Jim Clark with a Rotary minute.
Chris set the bar high, using only 30 seconds last time, so I'm going to really move it along. So you know there are more than 46,000 clubs, Rotary clubs worldwide, and they're in 529 districts. We're in district, what are we in? 7850. So recently I traveled to Hong Kong. I had a chance to visit there. So they have a Rotary club that's an English-speaking club. They weren't meeting when I was there, so unfortunately I didn't get to attend. But I did check out their website, and I thought it'd be very interesting. If you delve into any one of the 46,000 clubs of Rotary around the world, they're all doing very valuable things. Some of the things that are being done in Hong Kong included art therapy. So the club trained some students to work with people with dementia, to do art, I guess I'll say, with people that don't really have much else like that. So they went to a local nursing home and they worked with men and women that had dementia using art. They also sponsored a movie outing for parents and children with special needs. So they went out for the day, restaurant and to a movie, and for folks that have children with special needs. They had a Easter pop-up to raise money, so Easter egg. So during the Easter time, for 4 days, they set up a little pop-up like a kiosk in a busy spot, and they raised money by having the ability for children to come and decorate eggs. They sponsored a debate tournament for the secondary schools. Pardon me. So the students debated using the 7 core values promoted by Rotary. And then 10 members from the club were judges for the debate tournament. So they were involving students in Rotary. And then finally, probably what the coolest thing I thought was they sponsored a project to build what they call a clear bot, which is a little boat that would, tootle around the ocean, because Hong Kong is mostly islands and ocean, and would use artificial intelligence and GPS, machine vision, to scoop up garbage out of the ocean. So they sponsored a project with university students, and then they had elementary kids come in and look at it. And all these things were splashed with big Rotary. There's a big Rotary logo on the boat. The debate tournament got big Rotary insignias, and then the egg pop-up, they had Rotary on their little kiosk. So anyway, that's one of 46,000 clubs. And if somebody were to look at ours, they'd see the valuable things that we are doing, the service projects. So I just wanted to mention that all around the world, there's so much good being done. There's so much need. We all know about the needs of our world, but there's a lot of good being done by Rotary. So thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Dan. And then I'll turn it over to Chris, who will talk. But that was inspiring.
Need any of my unused time? To the senior member from.
Thanks for the Well, good morning, everybody. My inspiration is about a story I read in the recent Rotary magazine. It's about the Italian Rotary and what happened to the Italian Rotary during the pandemic by January in 2020. Italy, as y'all probably remember, was hit the hardest, and they had the highest number of cases of COVID within weeks of it being there. And they attribute that to the fact that Italy is a big destination for travelers. So anyhow, let's see. Rotary clubs in Italy began to recognize that COVID was going to be a real problem. Most clubs had preferred to work independently prior to the pandemic, but the pandemic forced them to create a collaborative plan to help with COVID. So Italian Rotary members working with Rotary members from Minnesota submitted 4 global grants. And these grant applications were used or the grants were used to outfit 28 Italian hospitals with equipment like thermal scanners at their access gates and that to detect fevers. And the grants also helped pay for triage units and these covered biocontainment stretchers that I wasn't aware of. Because Italy had become the epicenter of the pandemic, in the spring of 2020, the United States government approved a $60 million aid package. So what happened was the Rotary clubs in Italy and the U.S. aid have been partners for more than a decade. And the Italian Rotary members were the ones who decided how to distribute the aid. And I thought that was pretty cool that they entrusted that to the Rotary members. And the author for this was Diana Schoberg. And I just thought it was a really great story. I just took a snippet of her story, but it was really, really nice. It also spoke about Rotary helping to buy tablets for students who were falling behind because it was devastating there like it was a lot of places. So that's my Rotary Inspiration Minute.
Thank you. Well, both our Rotary Minute and our inspiration were inspirational Rotary. All right, just a couple of announcements before we move on to our speaker. Next week, Sandy is away, so we'll be providing breakfast ourselves. And I would love to have a volunteer to bring some fruit of some sort, and maybe a volunteer to bring some juice. Dan for the fruit, great, thank you. Anyone willing to bring a bottle of juice? Right, thank you, very good, thank you very much. And then on the 28th, we're going to have a business meeting. And that'll be a chance to talk through some things for the club and also or hear about some upcoming events that we're putting together and just get some updates from the committee. So we'll have probably a very full business meeting on the 28th. And then I'm just going to turn it over for Elizabeth for a couple minutes to talk about the Isham Fall Festival. Okay, so we've been invited to be at the Isham Farm for their fall festivals, which are 4 Sunday afternoons. And so it's similar to the farmers market kind of thing, where we're going out to talk about Rotary, be present, charm people into buying raffle tickets possibly, and give out prizes and stuff like that. And so I'm looking for volunteers. It's September 24th, October 1st, October 8th, and October 15th. The market's from 1 to 4, so setup would be 12:30 and takedown would be 4 till 4:30-ish. So I'm looking for people who can pick up stuff from the storage unit. So there's a place where you can check off on a sign-up sheet. For people who can set up, we generally need at least 3 people to set up because the canopy takes that many. The hours you can be there, people who can take down, and then people who can return things to the storage unit. Storage unit is access storage on South Brownell, and I can get you the information for that if you can do it. So as many people as I can get to sign up, that's how many markets we can do. I think it's pretty cool to have a presence there. People seem to enjoy it. It's really fun if you haven't gone and done a farmer's market yet. It's fun to be out there talking to people about how cool Rotary is and all the neat things we do, because people have no idea that we like give away scholarships and stuff like that. So, so I'm going to send this around. You can do check marks for pickup, setup, takedown, and return. Put the hours you can be there. That's the middle column here. And there are 4 dates. Hopefully this is pretty self-explanatory. And hopefully everyone can come at some point. That would be really fun. I heard from Helen that the most well-attended of the 4 is the one on Columbus Day weekend, as you might expect. So that's the October. Oh, yes, I'm sorry.
That would be October
Day weekend.
October 8th.
Yes, October 8th. The 3 days.
So we especially want to be there for October 8th.
Yes.
Sorry. Laughing in my face, but I was
okay, well, I'm going to turn it over to Jen now to introduce our speaker.
Thank you, Susan. And first, with a little apology for our unforeseen change of circumstances this week that we could not help with. We're going to be at Williston Place, and I thank you all for your willingness to adapt to that, and too bad we couldn't do it. And when that happened, I had to adjust who the speaker was. So I looked to my next two speakers and thought, who can I ask to fill in quickly? And I ended on Michael Kennedy because he had reasons not to say no to me. So thank you, Michael, for adjusting your schedule to be with us. Mike Kennedy grew up in South Burlington, graduated from the University of Vermont and George Washington University Law School. He has been Vermont Bar Counsel since 2012. From 2000 to 2012, Mike was Vermont's disciplinary counsel, investigating and prosecuting lawyers who violated the Vermont rules of professional conduct. Mike is a former president of the Vermont Bar Association. He sits on the Vermont Commission for the Well-Being of the Legal Profession and chaired the Legal Education Committee of the Vermont Commission on the Future of Legal Services, which all sounds like a lot of legalese to me. In 2022, Mike received the American Inns of Court Professionalism Award for the Second Circuit. And I'll go off script a little bit, which will scare him, but his dad, Mark, and his stepmom, Jane, and I were very fortunate to be with Michael when he received that award, both at the Thurgood Marshall Courthouse in New York City and at the Supreme Court in Washington, D.C. It was a nice time for us. Outside the law, Michael is a retired high school varsity basketball coach and an avid runner who recently completed his 25th marathon, and he is a resident of Williston. I give you
Thank you very much. Thank you for having me. As a resident of Williston, thank you for all you do. I'm aware of what you do and I appreciate it. Thank you. If you didn't get the reference, the reason I can't say no is because she's my mom. So that's why I was able to jump in and fill in for the speaker who couldn't come. So what I'm going to talk about is attorney ethics, attorney discipline, and Vermont's professional responsibility program. Jump in at any time. I do a lot of these. Ted's been to some. If Andy were here, he'd tell you the same thing. I much prefer conversation than lecture. So with that said, first I'm starting with a question, just to see what people, it's okay if you get it wrong. You don't have to yell out the answer. We'll treat this like the cone of silence. If you do have to yell out the answer and get it wrong, I won't tell anybody. But in Vermont, who is in charge of supervising attorneys and making sure that they comply with their professional obligations? Is it, want me to wait, Vince? Okay, sorry. Great, there we go. The choices are, is it A, the Vermont Supreme Court, B, the Secretary of State's Office of Professional Regulation, C, the State Ethics Commission, or D, the Office of Attorney General? Who's in charge?
B.
Heard a lot of B's and C's.
I'll go with A.
A is the answer. Who went with A? All right, Dan, good job. So I am employed by the Vermont Supreme Court. The Vermont Constitution says right in it that the Vermont Supreme Court has the sole authority to regulate the practice of law, to run the attorney discipline. So that's system. So that's who I work for. Okay. So this is what the court has done to run the attorney discipline system. They have adopted what are called the Vermont Rules of Professional Conduct, and we often refer to those as the ethics rules. The failure to comply with the rules of professional conduct can lead to a sanction being imposed against a lawyer's license. That's the extent of our jurisdiction. We can't get money for people. We can't get sort of injunctive relief. We can go in and if attorney violates the rules, a sanction can be imposed against their license. It can be very minor, what we call an admonition, all the way up to disbarment. Next, please, Vince. The way the court has set this up is they've created a board called the Professional Responsibility Board, which is a group of volunteers that meets 4 times a year to sort of supervises things. And then we have 2 full-time staff lawyers. Disciplinary counsel, who's the lawyer in charge of investigating and prosecuting lawyers, and then bar counsel, who's me. And what I focus on is proactive regulation. And what I mean by that is this. Next one, please, Vince. So I was the prosecutor from 2000 to 2012. And Ted, anytime, jump into to feel free.
Okay.
And back then, in those years, we averaged around 265 complaints. People actually sending in a written complaint. My lawyer should be disbarred per year. And we impose, when we prosecute lawyers, the Supreme Court has the final say in what happens to a lawyer. And whenever they get around to deciding what the sanctions are going to be, they always say something like this, like, here's what the lawyer did that's wrong. Now we have to decide what to do. The sanction we're going to impose on you, lawyer, is not because we're trying to punish you, but because we want to make sure that no other lawyers do this same thing, deterrence. And we also want to maintain the public's confidence in our privilege, really, to regulate our own profession. So that's why we're going to impose sanctions. And then finally, we want to protect the public from other lawyers who might do this too. I decided back then that's not the best use of resources. If our goal is to protect the public from lawyers who don't know how to comply with them after they violate the rules, that's not public protection. Next one, please, Vince. So what we did is we switched over what we do. And now since 2012, we focus more on what I call the proactive regulation, which is let's keep the fires from starting instead of only responding to them after they're, they're fully going, things are burning down. So let's do better to help lawyers not violate the rules. Next. So what I do, three things there is inquiries. My main job is lawyers and non-lawyers too can call me and say, for instance, sorry, Ted, I'm just using them as an example. Ted can call me at any time and say, Mike, I've got this going on in my practice. What do I do to make sure I don't violate the rules? And I try to talk them through it. I say, this is what the rule says. This is what the Supreme Court has said this rule means, da, 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 da. It's completely confidential. And not only that, if they call me and tell me they've done something that is a violation of the rules, I cannot tell our disciplinary prosecutor. I also do a lot of seminars, continuing legal education classes for lawyers. And I have a blog that I try to use to just put information out there that I've put in right there. Next. So when I first started doing the inquiries, I get about 600 a year. And you can see they've gone up over time as people, mainly because people back then in 2013 didn't even know I was available. And last year I did just under 1,400. Next slide. At the same time, we've driven complaints down, cut them in half. Now, I can't stand here and tell you honestly that the only reason complaints have dropped is because I'm available to answer inquiries, but I think there's some connection. So I think what we're doing is a good idea to help lawyers before they violate the rules. So what do you do if you have a complaint or a concern about a lawyer? You have two options. The first is informal, and that's contacting me. And you can say, Mike, I'm dealing with this lawyer and this is going on. I'm not really sure it's right. And I'll tell you this. I'll say, look, I'm not going to tell you if it's right or wrong, because that's not my job. I'm no longer on the disciplinary side of things. But what I will do, if you want, I will contact the lawyer and I'll share your concerns with the lawyer, and maybe we can all get back on the same page. That works in some situations. Usually they're pretty low-level types of disputes, like, hey, Mike, my lawyer won't call me. My lawyer won't send me my file. I haven't heard from the lawyer in so long. Things like that. Well, I try that, do that all the time. If it doesn't work, you can move to option 2, which is you can file a formal complaint against the lawyer, and it will be reviewed and investigated by the disciplinary side of things in our program to decide whether a sanction should be imposed against the lawyer's license. So that's what we do in a nutshell. So yeah, next slide and then we'll stop. That's us in a nutshell. I don't know how much time I have left, but what I wanted to do next, if there are no questions and if I have time. Okay, good. So that's us in a nutshell. Any questions about what we do or how we do it? Okay, we do need volunteers. So when a lawyer gets charged with violating the rules, we don't go to court for those cases. We have what are called hearing panels, and there are 10 of them around the state. 3 people are on each panel. 2 must be lawyers. 1 cannot be a lawyer. It's volunteer positions, but you would sit as a judge of that lawyer. Your decision gets automatically reviewed by the Vermont Supreme Court. We also have a diversion side of things that we started at the same time. We flipped things back in 2012, which is basically where we send complaints that are too serious to dismiss out of hand, but not serious enough to prosecute the lawyer's license. And it's like, you know, you've heard all, it's non-disciplinary resolution. It's like any other diversion program, say in criminal court, where you got to go there and everybody sort of works on restorative or reparative justice within the attorney-client relationship. But and we need people to serve on those too. If you're interested, you can get in touch with my mom and email me. So in the next couple of minutes, the rules of professional conduct, I want to highlight them for you and sort of give you a sense. Normally, if I was speaking to lawyers, I'd say, hey, lawyers, this is what you got to remember about the rules. I want to give you a sense of what you should expect, what you can fairly expect from your lawyer or the lawyer who's on the other side of some situation you're involved with. Now, what I've done is, so if you look at the rules of professional conduct, the ethics rules, they're super complicated. And because they were written by lawyers and judges, they're impossible to read. It's ridiculous. You know, it's run-on sentences, paragraph, subparagraph. It's impossible to read. Lawyers cannot remember all the ethics rules. And if they try to memorize them, I think it's a fool's errand. So what I've tried to get down the concepts to what I call the 7 C's of legal ethics. There are 7 concepts, one word each. Each word begins with the letter C that I think if lawyers keep in mind, instead of trying to memorize the rules, they'll be far more likely to comply with the rules than if they try to memorize the rules themselves. What do you think those 7 concepts are? What are words beginning with the letter C that you think set out these concepts or duties that lawyers must comply with to keep their law licenses? What's one?
Confidentiality.
Confidentiality is definitely one.
Conscience.
Conscience is that sort of, it is. Sorry. Very fair though. That's bigger picture ethics, really. Like capital E ethics as opposed to what we do. I like it though. Good one. Conflicts of interest.
Contact. Contact.
Contact in what context? You're right there. Communication. Yeah. Yes. We actually don't get into a lot of fee disputes, but yeah, we have 3 so far.
Trust accounts.
Trust accounts. The C word there is commingling. Couple others. Competence, communication, confidentiality, conflicts, candor, commingling, and I've thrown in civility. And I'll explain that if I have time at the end, but just real briefly, so you know, with respect to each of these C's, you can go ahead of one, thanks. You should expect your lawyer to provide you with competent representation, right? And to me, that means the lawyer has to know their job and do their job. That's simple. They don't, they're not providing you with competent representation. Next, you should expect your lawyer to communicate with you. And the next slide on that is, here's what the rule says. A lawyer has to keep the client reasonably updated, respond to reasonable requests for information, provide you with sufficient information to make informed decisions about the representation. Here's what I tell them. The next slide. You can skip ahead a couple, Vince, to one more. Yeah. One more. Thanks. Lawyers who have complaints filed against them have often failed to communicate with their clients. And everybody thinks, oh, it's because the lawyer doesn't call the client back or doesn't respond to an email. That's not what it is. Communication is the failure to be candid with the clients about what's going on in their case. Okay. So the example would be the client who thinks I'm going to get $1 million for this slip and fall. And the lawyer knows for a fact they're going to get $50,000 tops. The lawyer gets them $100,000, never bothered to tell them there's no way you're going to get $1 million. So the client has reason to believe, well, wait a minute, why don't we get $100,000? So they're upset. So they file a complaint. In one of Ted's former lives, being a criminal defense attorney, the client says, I'm never going to do a day in jail. And Ted knows the least number of days you're doing in jail is 6 months. Okay. Ted gets the guy 3 months. which is great work by Ted. Still, Ted hasn't bothered to disabuse him of an unreasonable expectation. So lawyers should be candid with you, which includes delivering bad news. Just like you would want to hear from an auto mechanic, you wouldn't want somebody saying, oh, don't worry about your brakes, knowing full well if they're about to fail, or your furnace or whatever. You want candid communication from your lawyer. Next, and this one more, please, Vince. These are what lawyers should be telling you. Honest communication about the result, how long it's going to take, how much it's going to cost, how often they'll hear from you, and what they will or will not do. Next, you should expect your lawyer to keep your confidences. I have a picture that I forgot to put in here that I use with lawyers where it's a picture of me standing with my hand over my mouth. That's what confidentiality is when it comes to the ethics rules. There is literally no reason for a lawyer to be talking about your case any place outside of where your case is supposed to be, whether that's between the two of you in the conference room, between the lawyer and the judge, or between the lawyer and opposing counsel. Confidentiality, which should be no gossip, no talk here at the tables before the meeting starts, nothing. Lawyers should not be talking about their cases. Next. Conflicts of interest. At any point in given time, they should never then be on the other side, okay? This is the #1 area of inquiry that I receive because we are such a small state that lawyers are constantly running across the same people over and over again, specifically in practice areas like criminal law and family law, where they all know each other and they're constantly involved with the justice system. Question.
But that doesn't mean that your lawyer can't fire you, right?
Your lawyer can fire you. There's an ethics rule that talks about sets out the situations in which a lawyer must withdraw from representing you, and then other situations in which the lawyer is permitted to withdraw from representing you. Okay. Next, commingling. They have to keep your money separate from their own. They have to account for your money when you ask, and they should always know how much of your money they have and the money that has been spent and what it was spent on doing for you. We audit lawyers at random. We have CPAs on contract who can just show up. It's a condition of having a law license. We do not see a lot of misappropriation. That is very, very rare. What we do see is lawyers aren't taught in law school or anywhere how to run a business. Okay, how to run a business. So we see a lot of bookkeeping type violations that aren't stealing money, but left unaddressed can lead for, wait, I'm not sure really whose money I have right now. Or I have this pot of money. I'm not sure if it's some of it's Mike's, if some of it's Ted's, if some of it's whoever. So that's why we do the audit program. And then the last C, you should not expect your lawyer to bully others on your behalf. We see this often in family law, divorce, where somebody wants to hire a bulldog. You hire someone and expect them to be super zealous for you, to do very competent work for you that's aggressive and really passionate. We are trying to, and our Supreme Court is on board, crack down on incivility. People who treat other people poorly just because they're on the other side of a dispute. It's a problem. It's an increasing problem in society within the bar. And within the bar, we have tied it. We have, within the legal profession, and I'm sure every profession, but I only know within the legal profession, we learned about 7 or 8 years ago from data nationally, there's a significant problem with behavioral health issues, substance abuse and mental health issues that isn't going away. And related to that is the stress, anxiety, and burnout that comes with practicing law. A lot of it can be traced back to incivility and other events. That's it. That's what I have. So that's how the system works. Those are the 7 C's of legal ethics that I urge lawyers to keep in mind instead of trying to remember the rules. If you have any questions about anything at all, I'll take them. One here.
I'll go a little off the direction of this right off the bat. I'm sorry.
Sure.
But I keep thinking about the Supreme Court. I like it.
Yeah.
That you've got some ethics, but I can't help but go, you know,
Yeah.
that's not.
You mean the U.S. Supreme Court?
Yeah.
Yeah. Why don't they have an
sorry,
ethics
the US
code?
Supreme Court.
Yeah, I think that's a very fair
Can
point. And I think
Yeah.
I try not to delve into national politics or even local politics. I try to stay in my lane, but I don't think there's many lawyers or even judges really who would give you serious pushback on any judicial body not having a canons of ethics that they have to follow.
Could we clone you? Could we send you?
Well, I have a younger brother.
I want to thank Jean because I'm sure she kind of maneuvered you just listening to you talk, but I think that's probably the biggest problem in looking at the Supreme Court. How could this be so flagrant and no one realized that there's some kind of a problem? What are people that do your job?
So people
or
who do
lawyers like you?
I don't know of many lawyers who, like I just said, can seriously argue that there should be no ethics code that applies to the Supreme Court. Every other federal judge has to abide by an ethics code. Every state judge does too. They have a separate code, separate set of rules they have to comply with. But there's another body in Vermont that investigates complaints against judges, just like we investigate complaints against lawyers. You know, I'm with you on that.
I'm just thinking in general, the climate of I watch the news, so I think probably many people here, how you must feel when you're watching the news with Trump's lawyers and all his lawyers, all his seemingly, not all of them, unethical, it seems, Giuliani and whatnot. Just how have they gotten away with all that they've gotten away with so far? Like, do other states not have a position?
That's a good, that's a real, first of all, I'll step back. My mom knows this. I don't watch news. I just don't. I'm not interested. Pay attention to the Red Sox and the Steelers and UVM basketball, and that's about it. Have they gotten away with a lot? I don't know. There is somebody who does out my job in every state. Giuliani has been prosecuted in 2 states now against his license, both the state of New York and the state of, they actually prosecuted him in his DC law license. 2 separate cases. He's suspended in New York. His DC license has been taken away. I don't know whether the other lawyers ever had complaints against them that were filed. For all I know, they've been percolating along. It just takes a long time. For all I know, there's been no complaints filed. For all I know, they had complaints filed and people aren't doing anything about it. I really don't know the answer to that. It would surprise me if there have not been complaints filed. But I just, because I'm not involved with other states, the only cases I'm aware that went to prosecution were the 2 Giuliani cases. And there's somebody being tried right now, Eastman, yeah.
Do you see any correlation between the like the size of a law firm and ethical violations? For instance, I would think that maybe with the commingling, a big firm that has a bookkeeping department might be able to have safeguards in place that like a 1 or 2 lawyer.
Yeah, so 2-part answer. I'll answer that part first. Big firms are much better situated to have a good bookkeeping system than the small firms are, for the exact reason they can hire bookkeepers, hire CPAs. And this happens nationally, where the big firms get in trouble nationally, and it's not often. I shouldn't say it's a big problem, but sometimes they just turn over management of the trust account to that trusted employee who's been there forever. And we got a CPA who handles all that, and the CPAs realize that, and so they're left unchecked. And if you see misappropriation from the larger firms, it's usually by a staff member who the lawyers aren't checking in on. The smaller firms, it's tough for them to do that. As far as I really urge the smaller firms to hire bookkeepers and CPAs instead of trying to do it themselves. The more general question you asked first, sort of a correlation between firm size and unethical behavior. I don't see any correlation between firm size and unethical behavior. I think that, or practice area and unethical behavior. I think every group on the face of the earth has within it people who are unethical, no matter the group. By number of complaints filed, there is a correlation, and it's usually the smaller the firm, the solo office, the more likely to have a complaint filed against them, just because of volume, and the chances are that they are just too busy to attend to that one client, who, when the client isn't satisfied that they're being attended to sufficiently, reacts by filing a complaint. The larger firms also tend to deal more with sophisticated moneyed clients who typically don't resolve things by filing complaints with us. They resolve things by going to the firm and saying, we want money taken off our bill or we're leaving unless you fix this. Got it.
I just wanted to point out, Mike is a gold mine, that he is incredibly valuable to the bar in Vermont, to everybody's call. I used to call him all the time. In my current job, I don't have the same kind of issues, but he is incredibly knowledgeable and will get right back to you. The other thing is that in terms of the smaller firms, my experience is that it's the kind of clients that you have too. I mean, when I had a public defender contract, I had ethics violation complaints against me because one time I lost a kidnapping trial where the guy held his own child as a human shield so he wouldn't get arrested by the police. And somehow it was my fault. And I was unethical when, as I say, we had a trial and I came in second. But anyway, it is an incredibly complex area. Oftentimes you wouldn't think it would be. And if you actually just stay as far away from the ethics line as you can, you're not going to have any real problems. But it's Mike is there for the lawyers, and he makes Vermont a better place to live in because of that.
Thanks.
Mike, is there a requirement or expectation that lawyers provide any pro bono work?
So it's aspirational. There's a rule, but says that you should provide 50 hours of pro bono work per year. Not mandatory, aspirational. Vermont actually is pretty good nationally. We have more lawyers meet the standard than any other state. Our bar association and some other groups do a pretty good job making pro bono services available, whether it's through a weekend clinic, but there's no requirement. There's always a need. And related to that, there's a need for just legal services in general that are, if they're not pro bono, just more affordable. And one thing I'm interested in doing on that, and I'm sorry, I'm going off, sort of expanding here, this alternative licensing I've mentioned here. I think we need to be, as a profession, more like the medical profession, where you don't go in and necessarily see the surgeon. You might see a physician's assistant who can help you perfectly fine. I think we need to do that within the law. Let paralegals and others who right now are not authorized to practice law do more, because A, they're out there, they're willing to do it, and B, it would be cheaper for people and allow people to access legal services that they aren't now able to access. And a perfect example of that is this. There are paralegals in, for instance, the divorce firms in town who can do a divorce and do it well. Right now, they are not allowed to go out on their own and represent somebody getting divorced. I don't know the first thing about divorce. I could quit my job, open up my own firm tomorrow. Mom, don't worry, I'm not. And take your divorce. Nobody would care, even though I wouldn't know what I'm doing, but that paralegal can't. And I don't think that makes any sense. So I think we need to let the non-lawyers do more.
Yes, Mike, I like the fact that you're proactive, and one thing in terms of being proactive is to educate people. I'm wondering, in terms of law schools and the bar exam, how much is ethics emphasized and taught?
So the law schools, I know that they all at least have one class. I don't know whether it's required at every law school. At my law school, it was. I think at most law schools, it is. Second, in addition to the bar exam, lawyers have to take what's called the multi-state professional responsibility exam, which is a national ethics exam. And you have to get a certain score, just like you do on the bar exam, in order to be admitted. And then third, every 2 years, we renew our licenses and have to have 24 hours of continuing legal education credit, 2 of which must be in ethics. Now, whether that's all working, who knows? I don't think I'll ever be out of a job, I'll tell you that. But there are some requirements out there.
Have our Supreme Court justices followed through?
What's funny is that judges in general are exempt from the continuing legal education requirement.
Michael, somebody on the board.
Oh, okay.
Dave?
Unmuted. It's very interesting, Mike. I am a realtor, and I'm sure there are other professions that have codes of ethics, but ours seems to be almost identical to what to what the attorneys have. And we have continuing ed, and I'm just about to take a half-day course on our code of ethics, which we have to do on a regular basis. But your 7 C's all seem to apply to realtors, and I'm sure, I don't know if you might want to comment on other types of professions that also seem to, I don't know who copied who. But I appreciate your presentation.
Thank you. I think we do share a lot in common with the realtors. And I'm sure you know Andy Michael. He and I do I do a lot of seminars for him. Well, actually, when he was still working, and especially the trust accounting issues are very similar because realtors and lawyers are both handling money often that isn't theirs. They're handling it on behalf of other people, and they need to make sure it's available so that the next closing can happen. But I'm not too familiar with what other professions have to do. There's the Secretary of State has almost every other licensed profession, and I'm not terribly familiar with their codes.
Amen.
Getting a warning sign held up. Anything else?
Yeah, I'm a retired. I call myself an unemployed physician, and I did practice for a long time, and I'm embarrassed to say that. And we often had some very knotty ethical issues, and we have resources, especially in hospitals, to settle those. But in terms of education, other than taking an oath to do no harm, there's really very little going on in medicine that's directed toward ethics. We have to learn about how to prescribe narcotic drugs, the vast majority of whom we don't do that anyway. So it is a bit of an embarrassment as I'm listening to you.
I haven't run across any unethical doctors, so
I have.
Okay, I'm sure. All right. Anything else?
Well, a quick question. If a lawyer ends up being disbarred, is there a length of time that usually takes?
The process to get disbarred?
Yeah.
So usually from a complaint to a sanction probably takes about a year in Vermont, from the investigation to the trial before one of those hearing panels to, in our system, actually, either the prosecutor's office or the lawyer who gets prosecuted can appeal to the Supreme Court. And even if no appeal is filed, we have a little wrinkle where the Supreme Court can order a review on its own motion, even if nobody appeals. Disbarment cases, A, usually get appealed, not often, but B, if they don't, the Supreme Court almost always orders review because they want to weigh in. So it takes about a year. If you are disbarred, there's no permanent disbarment in Vermont. It's essentially a 5-year suspension. And then any suspension that's over 6 months or a disbarment, the lawyer gets to come back, but they have to file what's called a petition for reinstatement, which is essentially a disciplinary hearing in reverse, where they have to prove that they have done whatever is expected of them to be rehabilitated and that letting them practice again will not be a detriment to the public.
I just want to congratulate you on your choice of a mother.
Thank you very much. All right, well, thank you all very much.
One more little task.
Oh, that's right.
Sorry, if you would be so kind.
God, there's moms. Talk about conflict of interest.
And just read the last 3 digits.
481. Oh,
Yes. Thank you very much, Michael, for adjusting your schedule and being with us today. And thank you for your words. And the Rotary is most appreciative of all our speakers. And we give a donation to the Williston Schools Mentoring Program in the name of our speakers. So we will be doing that for you too.
Thank you very much. Thank you all.
Thank you.